I refused to give my brother my kidney after what he did to our family. Some decisions haunt you forever, not because they're wrong, but because they're impossible. I'm Sarah, 35 years old, and 6 months ago I made a choice that tore my family apart but saved my sanity. My younger brother Daniel, 32, needs a kidney transplant. I'm a perfect match, and I said no. Before you judge me, let me tell you the whole story, the years of manipulation, the betrayal that destroyed my family, and the moment I finally chose myself over obligation. This isn't about revenge. It's about boundaries, self-preservation, and whether blood really is thicker than water when that blood has been poisoned by years of lies. The perfect family illusion. Growing up, everyone thought we had the ideal family. Dad was a successful accountant, Mom taught elementary school, Daniel was the golden child athlete, and I was the responsible older sister who kept everything running smoothly. Our suburban home with the white picket fence looked like something from a magazine. But perfection is exhausting to maintain, and our family's cracks started showing when I was 23 and Daniel was 20. That's when our father passed away suddenly from a heart attack. In his will, he left the family home and his substantial savings to be split between Daniel and me equally, $340,000 each, plus the house valued at $680,000. Dad had always been fair that way. He made us both executors, requiring our joint signatures for any major decisions. It was supposed to teach us responsibility and cooperation. Instead, it taught me that the person you trust most can become your worst nightmare. The First Betrayal. 3 months after Dad's funeral, I discovered that Daniel had forged my signature on documents to refinance the house. He'd taken out $200,000 in equity, claiming we both agreed to it for investment opportunities. I only found out when the bank sent notices to my apartment. When I confronted him, he acted shocked that I was upset. "It's family money, Sarah. I was going to cut you in on the profits," he said with that charming smile that had gotten him out of trouble his entire life. There were no investments. He'd used the money to fund his lifestyle, a luxury car, expensive trips with his friends, and endless nights at upscale clubs. Mom begged me not to press charges. "He's your brother," she cried. "Your father would want you to forgive him." So I did. I agreed to a repayment plan, and Daniel promised he'd changed. He even attended a few financial counseling sessions. I wanted to believe him because believing him meant our family could stay intact. Meeting Michael. I met my husband Michael when I was 26. He was a respiratory therapist at the hospital where I worked as a nurse. Michael was everything Daniel wasn't: reliable, honest, hardworking, and kind without expecting anything in return. We dated for 2 years before getting engaged. He knew about my complicated family situation and loved me anyway. He even tried to build a relationship with Daniel, inviting him to sports games and helping him move apartments. Daniel played the supportive brother role perfectly at our wedding. He gave a touching toast about how I'd always looked out for him and how grateful he was to have me as his sister. I actually cried. Michael's family welcomed both Daniel and my mom with open arms. For a brief moment, I thought maybe we really could move past everything. Maybe our family could heal. I should have known better. People don't change just because you want them to. They change when facing consequences becomes more painful than changing their behavior. The unthinkable happens. 4 years into my marriage, I got pregnant. Michael and I had been trying for a year, and we were overjoyed. I was 30 years old, finally feeling like my life was coming together. We bought a small house in a family-friendly neighborhood. Mom was excited about becoming a grandmother. Even Daniel seemed genuinely happy for us, offering to help with the nursery. But at 19 weeks, I went for a routine checkup and discovered there was no heartbeat. Our daughter, we'd already named her Emma, was gone. The loss nearly destroyed me. I took a leave from work and spent weeks barely able to get out of bed. Michael was grieving too, but he held us together. During this time, Daniel visited often. He'd bring groceries, sit with me, and for once he felt like the brother I'd always wanted. I let my guard down completely. I gave him our spare house key so he could help out when Michael was at work. That key would become the tool of his greatest betrayal. Some people see vulnerability as a chance to help. Others see it as an opportunity to exploit. The discovery. 6 months after losing Emma, I came home early from a therapy appointment. I needed to grab some documents from Michael's home office before heading to the bank. When I opened the office door, I found Daniel sitting at Michael's computer, external hard drive plugged in, frantically typing. He jumped when he saw me, quickly closing windows on the screen. "Sarah, I was just—" Michael asked me to grab some files for him, he stammered. Michael hadn't asked him to do anything. When I checked later, Daniel had accessed our financial accounts, personal emails, and most horrifyingly, photos from my phone that had backed up to the computer, including intimate photos Michael and I had shared privately. He'd copied everything to his hard drive. When I confronted him with Michael present, Daniel finally admitted the truth. He'd been planning to blackmail us. He'd racked up $85,000 in gambling debts and was desperate. He figured threatening to leak our private information would force us to pay. Cutting ties. That was my breaking point. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about violating my privacy during the darkest period of my life. This was about exploiting my grief and my marriage for his gambling habits. Michael wanted to call the police immediately. I should have let him. Instead, I told Daniel he had 24 hours to return everything he'd copied, and then he was never to contact us again. I changed our locks, blocked his number, and told Mom that if she wanted a relationship with me, she needed to respect my boundaries. Mom chose Daniel. She said I was being cruel, that he'd made a mistake, but he was still my brother. That family forgives. I asked her how many times I was supposed to forgive someone who kept hurting me. She didn't have an answer. For 3 years, I had minimal contact with my mother and none with Daniel. Michael and I went to counseling, both individually and together. We eventually decided to try for another baby. At 33, I gave birth to our son James, and at 34, our daughter Lily arrived. My life moved forward without Daniel in it, and honestly, I felt lighter without carrying the weight of his chaos. The phone call. 3 months ago, my phone rang from an unknown number. I usually don't answer those, but something made me pick up. It was Mom, calling from a hospital. "Sarah, it's Daniel. His kidneys are failing. He needs dialysis and he's been put on the transplant list, but the wait is years and his condition is deteriorating rapidly." My first feeling was numbness, then a complicated mix of grief for the brother I'd once had and anger at being pulled back into his orbit. Mom continued, "They need family members to get tested as potential donors. You're his best chance." I told her I'd think about it, but honestly, my gut reaction was no. Michael was supportive either way. "This has to be your choice," he said. "No one can make this decision for you." I talked to my therapist extensively. Was I obligated to save my brother's life despite everything he'd done? Did past betrayals matter when someone's survival was at stake? I decided to meet with Daniel once just to hear him out. Maybe he'd changed. Maybe facing mortality had transformed him into someone capable of genuine remorse and accountability. The meeting that changed everything. I met Daniel at a coffee shop near the hospital where he received treatments. I barely recognized him. He'd lost significant weight, his skin had a grayish tint, and he looked a decade older than his 32 years. For a moment, I felt pure sympathy. Then he started talking. He thanked me for coming and said he knew he'd made some mistakes in the past. Mistakes. He called years of theft, forgery, and blackmail mistakes. I asked him directly, "Are you sorry for what you did, or are you sorry you need something from me?" He got defensive. He claimed I'd always been judgmental, that I'd never understood the pressure he was under, that our father had always liked me better, so of course I got to be the good one. He said the blackmail thing was blown out of proportion. He'd never have actually gone through with it. As I listened, I realized he still hadn't taken accountability for anything. He was still the victim in his own story. When I told him I wouldn't be getting tested as a donor, he became angry. He called me selfish. He said I was letting him suffer because I couldn't let go of grudges. Mom, who'd been waiting outside, came in and added her voice to his. That's when I stood up and left. The family fallout. Word spread quickly through our extended family. I received calls and messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins. Most were sympathetic once they heard the full history, but some accused me of being vindictive. "He's your brother and he's suffering," one aunt wrote. "How can you live with yourself?" The assumption that I owed Daniel my body, my organ, my recovery time, and the potential health risks simply because we shared DNA felt suffocating. Nobody asked about my young children who needed their mother healthy. Nobody asked about the trauma of being repeatedly betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect me. Mom stopped speaking to me entirely when I made my final decision. She sent one last message. "If Daniel passes away, his blood is on your hands." That hurt more than anything Daniel had said. But I knew that keeping boundaries doesn't make you cruel. It makes you healthy. I explained to my kids in age-appropriate terms that sometimes grown-ups have to make very difficult choices, and that it's okay to say no even when people are upset with you. I wanted them to grow up knowing that family doesn't entitle anyone to violate your peace, your safety, or your body. Finding peace in my decision. It's been 3 months since that coffee shop meeting. Daniel is still on dialysis and the transplant list. I occasionally hear updates through family members who maintain contact with both of us. I won't pretend this has been easy. I've had nights where I question everything, where the guilt feels crushing. But then I remember that I'm not responsible for fixing damage I didn't cause. I didn't make Daniel forge documents, steal money, or attempt blackmail. His health crisis, while tragic, doesn't erase years of calculated harm. I'm teaching my children what I wish someone had taught me earlier. Compassion doesn't require self-destruction. You can feel sadness for someone's suffering without setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. Michael recently told me he's proud of me for honoring my boundaries, even when it's painful. My therapist reminds me that saying no to Daniel isn't saying no to organ donation. If I choose to donate in the future to someone else who needs it, that's my decision to make. I've started volunteering with a grief support group for parents who have lost children, turning my pain into purpose. My life is full of love, healing, and people who treat me with respect. That's the family I choose now. The morality of self-preservation. This story isn't about whether organs should be donated or whether family deserves second chances. It's about the fundamental truth that you cannot pour from an empty cup, and some people will keep puncturing holes in your vessel, no matter how many times you try to refill it. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or continuing to expose yourself to harm. It means releasing the anger so it doesn't poison your own life, while still maintaining the boundaries that keep you safe. The morality here isn't black and white. Daniel is genuinely suffering, and that reality is heartbreaking. But his suffering doesn't obligate me to sacrifice my physical health, emotional well-being, and family stability, especially when he's shown no genuine remorse or change. True accountability means accepting that our actions have consequences, even when those consequences are severe. If you're facing a similar impossible choice, know that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to say no to people who have repeatedly harmed you. And you're allowed to build a life surrounded by people who value you, respect you, and would never dream of exploiting your lowest moments. Blood relation doesn't grant unlimited access to your body, your resources, or your forgiveness. Sometimes the most moral choice is the one that lets you sleep at night, care for the people who truly depend on you, and finally break generational cycles of manipulation and guilt. The most profound lesson I've learned is this: love yourself enough to let go of people who refuse to love you properly, even when the world tells you that letting go makes you the villain. Your story, your body, your boundaries, they all belong to you.